Well, Michelle, welcome to Norway virtually. You are in Norway now talking to Norwegian students. I want you to introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about our history, how we met, and who you are, what you do. Go.
Great. Hi, my name is Machelle Johnson. I live in the United States, in the state of Virginia, actually, in the US, which is along the East Coast. I've lived in this state my entire life, went to university here. I have a graduate degree in political science. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. And what I do, I worked for the FBI for 11 and a half years, which gave me a very interesting perspective on a lot of things. And what I do now is some work in the IT field and writing and things like that in terms of a day job. And then I'm sort of embarking on more creative endeavors and doing more of the things that I'm passionate about, to include writing. I've actually gotten into some comedy, pageantry, and things of that nature. And how Pollyanna and I met is doing a pageant. We were competing together. It was a lot of fun. And it was a great time, and we became friends over that period. I actually came back to compete this past year and won the international title in my age division. So I'm very proud of that, to be the reigning Ms. Regal World. It's great. And I'm so happy for this to be my first appearance as Ms. Regal World. That's awesome. So thank you, Pollyanna.
Michelle, one of the things that the students were watching this who know you from your previous interview, somebody asked about the spelling of your name, that they had never seen Michelle spelled with an E before. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So it's very simple. My mom wanted something that was, not so out of the ordinary in terms of a name in general, but still a little bit of uniqueness in it. And so just that slight modification, she got exactly what she was looking for. The origin of the name, Michelle, actually means divine or goddess, regardless of the spelling. And it's funny, there's actually another person who lives in my same locale with the exact same name spelling as me, which is, it's very rare. So that's a very correct observation. But I thought that was interesting for us to be in such close proximity and to have the same spelling.
So now the ones who have asked, they have their answer. So some of my students also have read your book.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so it's been quite a journey the past few years. It's going to be I think it's 3 years now
Yeah.
since I competed in Ms. Regal World, and
Mhm.
it's been a blessing to get to know people from all over the world, and this exchange of ideas and having some of the pageant girls come in and give interviews and really
Mhm.
talk about the circles of English in the world has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to talk about some hot topics for the moment about the elections. And I have a question for you that relates to what we talked about before about the American dream. Do you believe that the American dream will be renewed with the upcoming elections?
So I think before I answer that, I have to kind of backtrack and take a look at, well, what is the American dream? And I think historically, and for most people, it's this idea of growing up in a house with a white picket fence, mom, dad, siblings, maybe a dog, getting a good education, being able to go on to college, and then getting married and having your own family and buying a house. And that's pretty much what it looks like in terms of how it's fed to us. I would venture to say it looks different for a lot of people, but that still sort of gets at that model, still gets at, I think, what people generally want. People generally want to be able to be educated, to be safe, to have a nice home, to be able to earn a living, things like that. So when we look at it in that context, do I think it will be renewed with this coming election? I have a hard time seeing that, regardless of who wins this election. And I say that for multiple reasons. I mean, when we look at the financial landscape in America, it's not great right now. People are having trouble buying homes because the interest rates are so high. Of course, that's affecting the millions of real estate agents that we have in this company or country, excuse me, because they can't sell homes. We are seeing many people lose their jobs to AI, and I mean to the tune of thousands of people per company. This is huge. I don't know that in one election term, 4 years, we're going to be able to fix all of that. I think depending on how we vote as a country, we may be able to select a candidate who can make better progress than another. Um, I don't see it being fully renewed in 4 years. I don't. There's a lot going on there. And on top of that, just looking at the finances of it, we're still sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. We can't afford to do that anymore. So there's a lot to be considered. I think it's going to take a lot longer than 4 years to get back to some notion of the American dream for most Americans. We can get there though.
And talking about the candidates, so we have a class this year who's doing a project where they will have a debate, and we have different people playing different roles. So we just watched some of the debates that have happened. What do you think about the candidates?
Oh, goodness. So let's start with the presidential candidates. Okay. So Trump. Well, first of all, let me back up. So let's just take a different look at the landscape right now, what we're looking at for presidential candidates. We have a former prosecutor running against a felon convicted on 34 counts of felony charges. So that's what it looks like in America. That's just that juxtaposition to me is kind of crazy for those to be the two candidates, a prosecutor against someone who's been convicted 34 times. So anyhow, with Trump, there's not a lot I can say. I don't even think that someone who's been convicted of 34 felonies should be running for the presidency. I don't. I think a lot of Americans feel that way. In terms of Kamala, I am impressed with how she did at the presidential debate. I think she held her own. I think she stuck to the facts and what she would like to do, even though as of yet, she doesn't have that put together as a formal plan. If you go to her website, she talks more about Project 2025, which is a project that has been put together by a group of Republicans that basically sets the stage for the first 6 months of the next Republican president and what they should be doing. And it's a whole other topic, but that is an interesting project to say the least. But I think that she has a lot of good that she wants to do. I like how she has presented it so far, even though we need to see more. If I have a critique, it's that I don't feel like we've seen a lot of her over the course of the Biden administration. In all fairness, I kind of feel like that about all vice presidents. I think they just seem to be a little silent and in the background, whereas I view that role as something that should have a little bit more presence. So I would ask the question, where have you been in the last 4 years? But I think there is some good that she can definitely do. JD Vance. Oh boy. Okay. So this guy is a former Marine. When he was a Marine, he was actually a journalist. And I mention this because I find that to be actually quite scary, given that he admitted to fabricating stories about Haitian, specifically Haitian immigrants in Ohio eating people's pets. This is a former military journalist who did that. Someone I think should have the utmost integrity in journalism and presenting stories, admitted to fabrication. That is simply not okay to me. I find him to be a surprising pick, mainly because he's so controversial and has been ever since he was selected on the ticket with Trump. And when I think of a vice presidential candidate, I think of someone who a president, potential president, wants to, if not facilitate them landing the office of the president, at least not hinder them getting there. And I don't think he's done a good job of that. I think he's done the opposite. And then Tim Walz, I think he was a safe pick. Also former military. There's virtually no controversy to be found so far. So I think it was a very safe and smart pick for that reason for Kamala.
We've been talking about how the media is portraying the different candidates, and I try to teach the kids about the biased information that they can get out there. So, one of the chapters of the book that we're studying, the textbook, is called Fake News Don't Be Fooled. What would you say to this new generation reading and getting information online? How should they pick their sources?
I think sources should be varied. So you need to be reading what the other side is saying, not just, if you align with a particular side of the House, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever that party is, you should be looking at what the other side is putting out as well. And I would say to be careful with social media, just because social media is something that has given everybody a platform. And whereas I just mentioned how, with JD Vance, my expectation would be that someone who was a former military journalist would have this, utmost integrity in bringing stories to the media. Even he didn't. So when you look to social media and, 99% of the people on there don't have any credentials in journalism or history or, political science or any position of authority to really speak on some of the things they speak on, you have to be careful. I would say take in any media you want. It should all be with a grain of salt. Always think about the intention behind what someone is trying to get across. Why are they writing this? And then fact check. We all have a responsibility to do our own research. And I think that's important now more than ever, especially because of social media. So, yeah, take everything with a grain of salt, do your own research. It's a requirement these days, it's not optional if you want valid information.
And this corroborates what we've been reading about with them because let's take something very simple. So, a lot of people were talking about how, oh, it's going to be, what's her name? Will Smith's wife who's going to play Rapunzel in the next Princess movie. And I said, no, that was not true. That was just a meme somebody posted. No, it's true. I saw it. And that turned out to be completely not true. So if something small like that, if they just start with a small story and the next person adds something, the next person adds something. So it is almost like a game of Chinese whispers when you
Mm-hmm.
whisper in someone's ear. Another question I have for you
Mm-hmm.
about the elections. How were the debates received in the US? So I want you to talk about your acquaintances, your friends, your family. How have they received the debates?
So I haven't actually, I've been incredibly busy this week. I haven't watched the vice presidential debate yet, but I did see the first presidential debate with Kamala and Trump. Um, it's interesting. It's almost difficult to answer this question, excuse me, because I'm sorry, let me just take a sip of water. This political landscape is so hot and contentious, people don't really want to talk about it. But there is buzz, the water cooler talk, as we say, and um, people are really sticking to their guns in terms of who their guy is. So if they are a Democrat, they're singing Kamala's praises. If they are Trump, they are singing his praises, regardless of what actually went down in the debates, which is just so interesting. I find that I don't really know what it is about this particular day and age and these last few elections, but we are so incredibly divided. It's almost like there's very little middle ground. There are the amount of moderates, political moderates, seems to be getting smaller and smaller as we move forward with each election. So I think that people, there are people who said that, Trump did a great job. There are people who talked about the fact that a lot of what he spoke about was, well, this person from this country likes me. And no, people do come to my rallies. And it's like, okay, but what are you going to do if you win the presidency? And there were people who talked about Kamala and how she, said she was going to do all these great things, but didn't really have a plan, which she doesn't. But, maybe she has more integrity because she's not a convicted felon. I mean, there's a lot to be said. Everything that I just mentioned, excuse me, I've heard in one fashion or another. But again, people are being very tight-lipped because it is such a hot topic. And I think people don't want to upset coworkers and family. So it's kind of danced around and just not really discussed as things used to be years and years ago.
That sounds almost like how it was when Jair Bolsonaro and Lula in Brazil were against each other.
Mhm.
And in my whole family, I said to everyone, I am not going to discuss the politics around this because I really didn't want to get into a fight. But I saw people that were losing friends over this
Right.
because
Yes,
the polarizing nature
exactly.
of the discussion.
Hmm.
So, and how about the USA as a soft power in the world? I'm saying soft, but perhaps I shouldn't say soft, but a power nation in the world. How do you see this position of the US and the responsibility that the next president is going to have with all that's happening right now?
I see it as potentially being a more executive heavy administration than possibly some past presidencies. And what I mean by that is, we're looking at what's happening in Israel and Iran and the Gaza Strip, what's happening in Ukraine. At the same time that there is so much happening here in the US, politically and otherwise, there is very severe and serious things that are happening across the globe. And, as a hegemonic power, we're going to have something to do with that. We're going to be sitting at the UN table discussing. Um, Again, we've sent billions of dollars to Ukraine. We've sent aid elsewhere overseas. So, and these are hot topics. These are topics that Americans care about, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. So I think the next president is going to have quite a hefty role ahead of them because there is, whether you're talking about immigration or how AI is affecting jobs in America, our economic landscape, um, things that are happening weather-wise that are unprecedented that we haven't seen before. All of those things have to be dealt with simultaneous to, are we going to be going to World War III? That's huge. That's at the top of everyone's mind right now. So I think this president is going to have his or her hands very full.
We talk about the US almost like all of us here when we talk about the US. I've lived in the US, but a lot of people haven't, but they talk as if they had. And they talk based off of what they see on TikTok, on whatever is on YouTube, or and I feel like they don't have a realistic picture of what's going on. For instance, we've been talking about gun control and how it could affect the lives of young people in particular. What are your thoughts about that?
So I am a gun owner, and I am pro, our constitutional rights to own guns. There has to be gun control, and that's one thing I like about Tim Walz. He is, and Kamala as well. The the Republican Party comes up every year, around not every year, every election year. Um, Always goes hard on gun control and trying to scare people. They're trying to take away your guns, and for those of us who can see through that, it's like, no, they're not. It is in the Constitution. Calm down. But what should happen is there should be mandatory federal checks and whatnot for people to buy guns. Why does any single person need 50 assault rifles or AK-47s? So I think there's a fine line between our constitutional rights to own guns, which I think is going to be there forever. I don't think that's going away. And allowing someone who may not be mentally fit to have an arsenal in their home. There's a difference. So I do believe in gun control. We have to be reasonable about who can own guns, how many, and the background checks that we're doing on people. But gun ownership, it's not going away in America. It's here to stay.
We don't have that in Norway, not in the same way. And
Really?
the police officers don't carry guns.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine that in the United States. Wow.
Yeah, they don't carry guns, so they will walk into a situation and see what's going. If they need a gun, then they'll go back to the car, to
Wow.
the police car, and get it.
Wow.
It's a totally different
Yeah.
world. But
Yeah.
but by the same token, what I see is that different countries have different needs
True.
and different cultural values and how you live your life and the
Mhm.
size of the country. So there's so much to consider.
Right.
So it's been 20 minutes. I always have to check because the attention span in the world right now for people of
Yeah,
all ages,
I
it's
know.
almost like after 15, 20 minutes, people are
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I fell asleep there. Like I was
Right.
awake, but I wasn't." So I want them to, so I asked you all the questions I wanted to ask about the US, about the elections, and the last thing I want you to say to my students, I want you to tell them something that you think the new generation should know going forward and navigating the world.
I think the new generation should know uh, our history, uh, the history of our individual nations, world history, because there are things in history that we need to ensure do not repeat themselves. And it's scary because there are certain patterns we're seeing now, and it's like, no, 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 this happened, 75 years ago. Let's take a deeper look at this. So I think we need to know our history thoroughly. Again, individual history and global, and really apply that to the policies that we're making, the people that we're voting in, look at them through this lens of history. And again, what we don't want to repeat itself and what we know has worked throughout history. I think that's a good filter to go by in moving forward, whether you are voting for someone or just living your life in general. Because those lessons that have been learned and those values that we've clung to that have worked for us, we need to keep them in place.
Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. And this whole interview is so rich in content and information, and it will help a lot of students here in Norway. So, and all over the world on
Great.
YouTube, different people come and watch this. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we'll stay in touch. But the interview itself will be recorded within this link. You feel
Okay.
free to use it for anything if you
Okay.
need
Thank you
to.
so much, Pollyanna. It was great to see you. Bye.